Okay, I'm doing another video to go further into this issue of the afterlife, the religious afterlife being fictional. Um, because, I've been studying, I guess you could say I've been studying the afterlife for the last 3 or 4 years. And so, all the ancient afterlife traditions are basically the same. They're all from the same root, and at least all the major ones that are known, like the Hindus, the Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, um, and the Mayans, the Incas. They all had the same afterlife uh, tradition. Basically, when you die, your soul crosses the ocean to the underworld. So for for the Egyptians and Greeks and Indians and stuff, that meant it would go over to America, the underworld. Uh, and for the Americans, like the Mayans and Incas, Aztecs, it meant their soul would go to their underworld, which is Afro-Eurasia. So, like, the reason that I say that this is fictional, I mean, in a way, it's like by the fact that I've proven that that's not fictional, is how I've proven that it is fictional. Um, and by the way, like, you know, sorry to make like 3 videos on the same topic in a row, but like, I just hate that my phone cuts me off after 13 minutes. This is why I know people like the short videos, but I can't go into topics this important and complex that quickly. So, but anyway, and I, it's my first day not eating any edibles for like a while, so it puts me in a weird mood. So I feel like the need to make a bunch of videos, I guess. Um, anyway, um, but all these funerary traditions, they all go back to, the ancient, pharaohs and the Sumerians and stuff. And um, so, yeah, it's like by proving it's factual, I'm proving it's fictional. Because, like, back when everybody, you know, thought that it's just 100%, quote unquote, mythological or supernatural, like that there's no real underworld. There's just a supernatural land that either is invisible to mortals or maybe, yeah, something like that. Like, um, so that just by the fact that it was this land that was not thought to exist, it was therefore assumed that all the beliefs associated with it were actual beliefs. Because why else would you have this? Would you be talking about this weird mythological land? But by discovering, I learned from the Indians, the Hindus, that the underworld is America. And then I found ancient Egyptian maps of the underworld, which are maps of America. And so by doing that, it shows that, pretty much proves that most of the ancient, or a lot of the ancient stories about the underworld are fictional. That the land is a real land, and oftentimes it's described in exquisite detail, and like the way to sail there and everything. but then there's the stuff about the afterlife, and of course stuff about the gods in the underworld tends to be, fictional slash metaphorical. So like, yeah, metaphorically, we all, our souls go to the underworld when we die because our souls are like the sun, and the sun goes to the underworld when it dies every single night. And like in the ancient Egyptian books of the dead, it's I mean it's kind of a mix. Like it's confusing because in some ways it's referring to the underworld as a place to settle, but in the same books it's also referring to the deceased soul going there every day, going around the planet every day, like the sun, like all the celestial bodies. So that's like the real like I just think it's highly suggestive, if not proof, that the ancients were unaware of any actual afterlife. Because if they did know of any actual afterlife, they would have probably talked about that instead of what is clearly blatantly, metaphorical, fictional stuff about America. Because, like in all the Greek and Roman writings, the heroes go to the underworld, they cross the ocean and they reach the Antipodes or whatever, they reach the underworld, and then they see like all their dead like relatives and all these ghosts and stuff. And I mean, in some sense, metaphorically, that's true. Because if you were, an Afro Eurasian person and you went to America, you would see people who physically and culturally, in many ways, resembled their ancestors. Like a lot of the most ancient traditions of Africa, Europe, and Asia were preserved longer in America. So, in the metaphorical sense, and of course, like there were people from Africa, Europe, and Asia going there. So, like you basically would see like a blast from the past going to America, just like Columbus did. He arrived, he has all this steel and all this newfangled stuff. They don't have that yet. So they're basically more similar to the ancient Europeans before steel was developed and bronze and all that. It's closer to the Neolithic population of Europe, which was dark skinned, um, or at least was partly dark skinned. It was, I think, a mix. And so, yeah, like that's clearly not true. If you actually, and so obviously, I can only prove that now that I know the identity of the underworld because I live here. I live in America. I was born in America, lived my whole life here. I never seen a spirit. I never seen the ghosts of Ulysses and Homer and all these people like that supposedly the Greeks would see whenever they came here. So I know it's fictional. And I don't think America was full of horses. There's a lot of embellishments that they put into these stories, and including in the Hindu tradition, that makes it clear that it's not like literal. The place is literal, but the details of it are often far from it. And then, the idea of like going to heaven, like, I mean, that's a very convoluted thing because Christianity doesn't even really teach going to heaven. That's more, it teaches it now, but biblical Christianity did not. Like, Jesus went to the underworld when he died. It's called the harrowing. So, if he went there, I don't know why other people think they're, going to go to heaven or whatever. I think it's something that the church came up with later because they realized the underworld was such a source of inspiration to the pagans that they had to demonize it and they had to separate Christianity from it entirely. Um, but originally, heaven was a place for, at least like in the Sumerian tradition, it just says everybody who's cremated goes to heaven. Their spirit goes up to heaven. And if they're buried, then their spirit goes to the underworld. So that's not anything like what people think nowadays of like, oh, I went to heaven and it means like everlasting bliss. No, like in the Sumerian tradition, if anything, there's probably more bliss in the underworld. And they're just stating the fact that if you burn somebody and you cremate them, the smoke rises. So it goes up to heaven. Heaven means the sky. Only our very recently have people forgot English and thought that heaven is like a magical castle with gates and stuff. Traditionally, heaven just always meant the sky. So yeah, you can translate it either way. So yeah, your soul goes up to the sky if you're cremated, and that's factual. That's factual. I mean, your spirit. I mean, whatever. That's true. You go up to the sky if you get burned. Um, in terms of whether anybody goes to the underworld, again, like everything about it is so clearly embellished and metaphorical that there's certainly no reason to assume that there's any reality behind it in terms of a soul actually going to the underworld. And especially because there's no agreement even within texts of whether the soul stays in the underworld or whether it just continues spinning around the planet every day. Um, so, um, damn, it's about to cut me off. But anyway, like one thing that really makes it clear that that the point of these underworld traditions is not actually funerary is the fact that these maps seem to be the best maps available. So they were the most up-to-date maps, and they're only found in these funerary traditions, only found in these coffins of the Book of Two Ways in Egypt. And you can see that each map, they're doing more exploration. They add some new islands onto it. So clearly, these are just maps for explorers. And the rest of this stuff is a cover story. I mean, it's allegorically rich, metaphorically rich, but like the most accurate map was 5,500 years ago. But then that one kind of got lost in translation because it was shown antipodally flipped inside out. So the later maps are not as good for the coastlines, but you can see that sometimes they correct some of their mistakes from the original, you know, um, neglecting to flip it antipodally to the correct way, but they continually, you can see over the generations, they are exploring. You can see they add new aspects, basically new maps onto the original map. So this has nothing, they're obviously using these maps while they're making new maps because they're using the maps they have to sail to America and then fill in the hazy parts or the parts that are inaccurate. So there's no part of any of that suggests anything about an afterlife. Like, if they're crossing the whole ocean,